Remember Laserdisc? No, me neither. I've heard of them, but never seen one, as the format was extremely rare in Europe, until I went to Japan about 5 years ago. It got this reputation for being the country of free future, and yes, there is technology everywhere. Some of it cutting edge, but you're just as likely to fax machines, toaster ovens, punch cards, floppy disks, and indeed laser discs. In Alaska, Japan, second largest city, a giant megatropolis of epic overpasses and neon lights, laser discs are even still today readily available. In Den Town, the city's electronics and Okatu heaven, laser discs line shelves alongside VHS and DVD. I was over there at work as an English teacher, but in my spare time, I wandered about the multitudinous alleyways, subways, and even high streets, exploring, walking, drinking, shake one cups, and eating Tazquisca and Yakuzi all hours. At the district of Den Town, it's also known as Nippon Diabanshi. There was plenty of interest when the Western tourist made cafes and young women in stubborn plays serving from one bone in china teapots in response to the delicate little bells placed on each table. Multi-story manga and anime stores with 7 feet tall of Gundam guarding the doorways. I remember a strange unmarked doorway. The only information on the sign outside of being colorful of a drawing of an angry carrot with muscular arms wearing high heels and stockings. I've never stepped through the door and I probably never will. Another thing you need to know about Japan as a whole is Yokosuka in particular has a homeless problem. There seems to be no support of the structure for people with social problems, unemployment, poverty, drug dependency, and not even as an attempt to sweep through them at the site. Alongside many roads, under bridges and traffic islands, and in the city parked with people living in tents, both caves and semi-permanent shacks or shields. Some of these guys are in a terrible states. I once saw a man stepped out of his roadside shed in bare feet. His toes and toenails were mangled, what looked like broken bones, sticking out of a stumpy raw flesh. The others were fairly well dressed like salarymen who were on their luck. Even Oskasho Ogoen, in the grounds of Okarishka's famous castle, where Tokugawa defeated Toyotama in 1615, establishing the 250-year dominance of Tokugawa Shogunate. It was inhabited the shacks and the tarpaulin strung between the cherry blossoms. Despite the number of people living homelessness, it's exceedingly rare to see anybody begging or even busking for change. For that reason, it drove my attention when, one night while out in the walking of Nakanoshima, Koen meets Park, I saw what appeared to be a redundancy store. Outside, a tiny wooden hut of scrap wood and metal, not big enough for one person to lie down. I sat in an elderly bearded man's disgusting in his clothes. On his feet he wore plastic bags from 7-Eleven in front of him. Laid on the ground was a square of tarpaulin. It was random array of scrounged old tat. I glanced around across as I continued walking. It had passed midnight, but the peace like Yokosuka means little. Restaurants and shops were still open, and the park was full of life. Besides the homelessness of people were also drunk salary, men sleeping off a skin full of steak, and young lovers practicing musicians. Because of the flimsy nature of the walls in Japanese apartments, a couple of them wanting to show time to themselves can actually find more privacy in a public park rather they can at home. As I continued my walk, I saw a young man practicing drums. He set them up a full kit of a bass drum, snare, toms in hi-hat, and in the whole lot. It was bashing its way onto the grass. Underneath the heavy loaded, though the cherry blossom, I walked around the path, doubling back on itself and heading back the way I came. I was getting tired and had to be up early, but I was enjoying the sights and moonlight. As I walked past through the homeless man for the second time, we accidentally made eye contact, just for a second, and then both looked down at this arrangement of objects. I walked over to where he sat and stood before him. My Japanese was so poor that I couldn't really make out. Partly it was due to my lack of fluency, but it was also the tiny croak he spoke in the fast staccato, like overstimulated Geiger counter. I tried to mumble the few words in Japanese, soon settled with, "Sorry, I don't understand." "Sale it kado cheap," he said, and pointed to one item that appeared to be a bundle of electrical cables and the two pin plugs that were still attached. The appliances they once served were nowhere to be seen. Gayu kogen, 500 yen, I figured. About $5 American, £2 and 50 pence of British. He pointed to another one of a rubber accompaniment doll's head, which looked like it had been run over by a car. Gaiku yen. Its stained, wrinkled soft-core porn magazine, and the cover of the star stuns a young Japanese lady, a girl really, with painted lips and a black bikini. Gakuen. A hubcap from a Toyota. Gakuen. A carrier bag, 7-Eleven, contained a small pile of practically smoked cigarettes. Goyukakuen. Dead bird. Kayukuen. A sudden pair of trousers, looking at like they really recently had been fished out of Okasaga's many rivers. Gaishu yen. A 12-inch by 12-inch cardboard square sleeve with the disc inside reading Gakuen. I bent down to get a closer look, and the cardboard had once been white, but had been clearly soaked and dried out once or twice and stored in damp conditions. It's wrinkled and peeled off the scruff of filth. In the corner I could just make out the image of 3 eggs in a line, with the initials NHK written across them. The logo was for the Japan's public broadcasting station. I picked it up and turned it over. On the back, there was some faded handwriting. Jiken, which I had no chance of depicting with the katana. I let through, but I tripped over the sleeve sideways just for the disc to slip out of my hand, up to the point where I had expected the shiny blackness of the vinyl. Instead, I saw the silver of the laser disc catching the streetlight, shimmering the veins of electric blue like motor oil on water. Even so, there wasn't significant scratching on the odd patch where the aluminum surface had peeled, revealing the plastic beneath. I didn't know what that disc was, and it wasn't convinced that it would play at all, but it significantly was curious, and the old guy obviously needed the money. I paid him 500 yen coin and thanked him politely too. "Thank you, Domenico Agricho Gomasu." He bowed his head a little, and then I set off walking. The laser disc tucked under my arm, a few feet away from when I heard him muttering, yelping. When I glanced back when he was looking in my direction, I couldn't understand what he was said, and the wind blew gently, taking his words away into the treetops, high-rise apartment and blocks, light polluted this night sky. I didn't own a laserdisc player, so the disc was forgotten for a couple of weeks. I spent some time on the coffee table, on the floor, under the sofa. I propped up the bedside TV anywhere, and it could be ignored. I had the intention of ever doing anything with it, and certainly wasn't going to buy any laserdisc player just to find out the disc was damaged beyond repair. An American friend was over one day when I noticed the disc. He asked me about it, and I told him how I acquired it. He agreed to it. It looked unlikely to play, and also couldn't read the handwritten kanji on the sleeve, but he knew a Japanese technical expert and the equipment and know how to intentionally salvage it. He contacted him, and a couple of days later, he was available, and we visited him at his apartment. Most of the Japanese living rooms has the usual stuff: seating, TV, dining room, etc. But this apartment and living room sound like a lot of video equipment, computers and digital analog tape decks, wires stretched across, tangled everywhere, monitor screens and speakers were in stacks. He took a look at the laserdisc, and he agreed that there wouldn't be much surviving the data, but there was something he could salvage. He had a higher end player called the Muse High Vision, which he said could go for the defects of that normal player couldn't. He ran it through the processing amplifier into the capture card of many of his PCs and the specialist software that it contained. He told us that he would need time to clean it up and encode it when we would leave it to him, as it would be much boring to watch. We agreed and went to a nearby bar for a few beers and a couple of rounds of yakitori. Grilled skewers of different parts of chicken, breast, neck, crispy skin, meatballs, heart, liver, cartilage. It's a great beer food for our technical expert. Our friend knew we were there, and he knew it would be a best round to collect us when he finished. A couple of hours later, when we were nicely drunk and our bellies were full, we began wondering if he would be much longer. Just as my friend was about to make a call to our technical expert, was suddenly standing nearby beside our table. His face was white and gaunt, whiter and gaunter than you think and expected from someone. With such dedication, digital technology, and he placed the laserdisc with his sleeve and black DVD box on the table. Without saying anything, he turned to leave. My friend and I looked at each other as he grabbed the Teachy sleeve with a "wait!" Despite his reluctance, we got him to sit still with us, and we had a drink brought over to him. He drank quickly, like he couldn't wait to be out of there, and couldn't answer any questions about it. When he found it on the disc, he said that it was all on a .ai AVI stored in the DVD, and we should take it and go. He repeatedly warned us off about it. He deleted it from his computer, and we should be as well advised to destroy both discs and forget about them. I asked him if we could read the scrawled kanji from the laserdisc sleeves. It meant nothing. He said nothing and didn't understand why. He said it like it was an ancient character set, compared to me trying to depict an old English written in a dense Gothic script. He didn't even want payment for his work. He just wanted to forget about it. But I managed to force the 1,000 yen notes into his hand. He thanked me repeatedly, graciously bowing his head, and asked pathetically if he could go now. We said sure, and he got up and basically ran out of the room, shut the door without another word. At this point, we could not understand his reaction at all. He was either very incoherent and nervous man normally, or he had seen something terribly unsettling that he was struggling to come into terms with. We, of course, had a few drinks, so we dismissed him as a weirdo and laughed it off about it. But in retrospect, I know this behavior would have been understandable. In fact, I think he held it together well just to bring us the discs to us, and had this position, I may have disappeared from the contact, turned off my phone and ignored the doorbell until we went away. I may have called the police and reported us of any suspicions of committing insane, terrible crimes. I may have babbled and drooled on my way into the secure metal institute, where I would bang my head against the soft walls until I died old, and expect alone with the insects in my mind under my skin. Soon we left the bar. I was excited to go back to my apartment to wash the disc, and much to my regret as what we did, there were a few cans of chocolate to keep us drinking mood going. I stuck the unlabeled disc into my laptop. There was one file on the disc, a .avi with a random alphabet numeric name, something like 000A54H4.avi. I checked it and double-clicked it and full-screened the video. It troubles me to think of what back what we saw. Those terrible things sobered us up and kept us from finishing our drinks. That has kept the sleep away from most of us for the last 5 years and effectively ended our relationship. That ruined our night, troubled our lives. Regardless, I try to remember all of what I saw in the video. A disgusting nightmare version of what appeared to be a lost and final episode of the 1980s American family sitcom Alf. The conclusion of the cliffhanger, to which I saw him captured by the aliens task force. The video began with a loud, high-pitched squealing sine wave and tearing through the ears. On the screen was a test card pattern, vertical bands of bright color at the tip of the top half, blocks of black and white and gray at the bottom. This remained on screen for about a minute. occasionally broken up with the pixelated blocks of digital distortion. The whole time accompanied by the high-pitched sine wave. Suddenly nothing. Black screen and silence. After a wait which felt like minutes, but could easily have been seconds, the screen flickered onto an old video cassette, presumably from after an analog and the digital transfer. Still the occasional explosions of the digital distortion from the corrupted laserdisc. The NHK logo began to fade into the black background, but suddenly glitched out. The screen breaking up into the pixelated blocks, shouting out with a burst of white noise that disappeared quickly as it appeared. What remained on the flickering screen was a view down of the dirty, dimly lit corridor. The floor and walls had been appeared entitled what some sort of hospital, but filthy and damaged everywhere though, as it had the scene of floods and massacres. Most of the lights were out, and the ones that worked flickered intermittently. One of the sound that was an occasional electronic buzz of the lights, almost too quiet for the perceive. All down the corridors into the distance were double hospital doors and windows at eye level. A quiet, pathetic whimper or groan of pain and defeat emerged slowly from the electronic buzz. A fearful, sobbing someone, reduced helplessness by the torture and humiliation. Suddenly the digital no distortion ripped away, and the image brought back with the camera moving down the corridor, screaming guttural roars. Someone, if one of the rooms was evidently being subjected into a heinous ordeal in which could not express. Only the screams of unenthusiastic cutting and tearing. Up until this point, we'd been fairly good-humored about the video, but something about the screaming and sobbing unsettled us. This was not the sound that we were of acting. It was more the sound of real agony, the sound of someone or something being maimed and mauled by the hands trained of cruelty. The camera then continued to point down the corridor, and screaming grew worse and worse over the voices joined in various desperate calls, and screams of range of pitches and bizarre alien languages, tore at as if it been from those in person prisoned in the rooms, leading off from the corridor. They howled in response to the pain of their fellow inmate. The screams built and built to crescendo, and flickering the video distortion worsened, to the point the picture was completely obscured. And just as the noise was so bad, I thought I would cry more digital distortion, and the white noise ripped out for everything. Picture returned with the image that shocked us. It made us cry out in horror and surprise, an almost obscured burp of laughter. The chorus of the screams were silenced by the image on the screen that was so expected to us. The, the collusion and the familiar childhood image was unspeakable viciousness, a contraction that really broke our minds. Filling the screen was Alf, the alien form of it from the TV series of the same name, was shot close up, showing his head from his shoulders above, lay above a stainless steel of dissection table. White poured down in front of him, make him shot out the image of stark and overexposed, even though it was a flicker, worn out video. He lay in his head close to his side, his fur matted with dark blood and vicious wires and electrodes penetrating the top of his head. He sobbed gently while his pain was unbearable, Janit's suffering, which made us desperate to reach out and help a fellow living creature. His expression of pain was both human and animal. He began to turn his head. The effort was clearly as much as he could muster. After a few failed attempts, he tried tired whimpers, and he faced the camera with closed eyes, more digital distortion and white noise, and then Alf opened his eyes, beaten and bloodshot. Strangely human eyes, though, for a person was entrapped beneath Al's skin. He tried to speak. "Please, I miss you," he croaked. "I miss you." His last words were translated to Japanese words. As the title of the word elf was in big letters that sound familiar as the front of the katakana Japanese translation appeared on screen, Elf let out a horrendous blood-curdling scream, out of breath and panting and screaming until his voice was hoarse and he could scream no more. But between his sobs and desperate gasps of breath, he screamed and screamed and screamed and stared into the camera, with those teared up, dying pleas eyes staring at us, at me. As he screamed and screamed, this must have gone on for a few minutes at least. Just when we thought we could take no more, just then the constant screaming was eating away at our very souls. That terrible saxophone music started. We couldn't believe it. Along with the continuous screams in the saxophone, led to the theme song from the third and fourth seasons of Elf begin to play. It was the same music, but somehow rawer, as if it was pushed right through the overload speakers and re-recorded into the wax cylinder, then blasted out again, ear-splitting volume. Then between the interspeeded cuts of joy scenes from the past, shots of Tanner family credits starring Max Wright and Schweden, and random rips of analog and digital distortion, increasing the severity of all time. All the images of terrible torture, a close-up of a hand being drilled, a leg being hobbled over with a sledgehammer, and all the hideous screaming and panting and screaming and crying in the quality footage was disorienting as well as the happy memories in the torture, miserable wails and distortion and the saxophone music, white noise concealed as I began to feel sick. All of those terrible experiences built up into a roar, and suddenly the video jumped and stuck on a loop. A split second of a smiling Willie Tanner with starring Max Wright, and Bolognese with across the full body of a shot of Elf strapped into the tabletop, with his torso peeled down upon revealing the beating, bleeding insides of this alien automaton. These two hideous images, jumping, cutting, looping between each other, irregular intervals, all the while screaming. The white noise, the distorient lumping, xylophone stuck, and I swear all the clamor I could hear was the maniacal laughter of Alf himself. Those two images looped for so long, I began to think it was the actual dyed AVI that was skipping somehow. But as I was checking it, I saw the VLC time slider moving along naturally. The looping continued until more serious distortions obliterated all sound visuals, replacing them with pixelated blocks and indistinguishable noise. When the picture returned, it was a lower quality still, and the scene had changed. The camera was now a camcorder quality, seemed to be lying slightly over to its side on the tabletop, looking across the room to be an autopsy table where Alf lay strapped down. Lightning was dim, and a green tinge on the picture was night vision. The scene was obscured by someone stepping in front of the camera. A person in a doctor's scrubs, gloves and apron, heavily stained with blood and feces. They had just adjusted the camera slightly, stepped back and shot of Alf, who may have been lying unconscious and seemed to, and began mumbling and whimpering, begging, "No, no, please, no!" His head moving side to side slightly. He appeared to be delirious, distressed and barely alive. The doctor walked back into the shot and stood with his back towards the camera beside Alf and the autopsy table, and the features that were covered in the gray surgeon's hat and face mask stood all over Alf, looking down at him, appeared to be talking. We couldn't hear a word he said, just the occasional calm, consistent, penetrating through Alf's sobbing and pleading, the slight movements of the head and shoulders. The scene remained unchanged, except for the persistent random interface of the distortion, maybe for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of audible, calm speech, unchanged except for the occasional sudden jump cuts to the smiling faces of Kate, Lynn, and Brian Tanner, who seemed to be looking on curious on glee. It was as if though the surgeon, the torturer, was explaining the matter of faculty and exactly what he was going to be doing to Alf. The sobbing and pleading continued throughout, then a brief flash distortion, a white noise leading to suddenly blackness. I don't know how long the blackness lasted there. It may have not been on the video. Perhaps I passed out momentarily, or just shock I left a blank hole in my memory. Whatever really happened, when the picture came back on the screen, it had changed yet again. The camera was on the move, held in the hand of someone who I presumed to be the surgeon, not pointing at anything about the swinging wildly with the 5 movements of the arm. This was dizzying, producing blurred effects, bloodstained walls, and spilled gore like an abattoir floor. Soon it studied and spun around with the autopsy table, where lay the mutilated headless corpse of Alf. It jump cut to Kate, Lynn, and Brian in a happy conversation. The camera panned along the body upwards towards the ceiling, towards the source of the aphrodisiac drip drip of dark liquid. There, hanging by the cables and wires, were the several silenced head of Alf. His scalp was shaved, ears were sniped off, and allowed access to mutilated penetrating electrodes. Below the stump of his neck hung a spine pulled from his body, although he didn't even notice the entire time. In retrospect, it occurred to me that there had been something wrong. Well, obvious it was all wrong. I mean, was there something not you expected for the spine? Rather than repeating structure of the small separate vertebrate, the spine began at the neck, the two long thin parallel bones, which ran half a length, terminating a joint where it connected a singular thicker bone running down the rest of the way. Thinking back, I have become convinced over time that Alf's spine was not a spine, but the bones I saw were radius, annulata, and humerus of a human arm. As the camera stayed on the screen for a moment, the words created by Paul Fusco faded into the screen as Alf's eyes blinked open. He looked directly into the camera. The voice of the cameraman sounded like the voice of the surgeon, while the voice of Willie Tanner saying, "Good morning, Alf." Alf screamed in a scream of guttural anguish, and credit sequence rolled. Humorous pictures of Alf drinking from the toilet, turning on the glasses, peeking through the blinds, wearing headphones, all that stuff. But instead of the theme tune playing, it was just that screaming, desperate panting and crying. Immediately as the video ended, I turned and was sick over the arm of the sofa onto the wall. Sick and sick again. I rested my arm trying to recover my strength for a minute or two, and eventually looked over my friend. He sat motionless, mouth clamped shut, eyes wide open and empty. Hands were held out what it could have been like a shrug or begging, even praying. I called his name and got him his response. I shook him by the knee, and then his shoulder, called out his name again and again. Suddenly he snapped out a bit, came back to life in his eyes, just a bit. He then looked around the room, as if he was wondering where he was. He came over to me. We looked at each other, shocked and disbelieving. That some rise of more vomiting. I rushed over to the toilet, heaved over and spat and sobbed through my mouth and nose. This was going to be heard for the front door closed. When I came out of the bathroom, my friend was gone. So I had the laser disc, and so the DVD from my laptop. The disc tray was open and the VLC was open on my desktop, but the file was gone. I wanted to play it again, which I definitely did not. I wouldn't be able to. After I cleaned up my vomit, I had failed to contact my friend. He wasn't answering his phone. I went to bed and fell to sleep. I lay there for hours staring at the ceiling at the terrible images running through my mind. All at once I heard a voice somewhere in the apartment and managed to buck up the courage to investigate to find no one. I returned to bed with the lights on and drifted eventually until the fits of terrible, identifiable nightmares. I woke up wet in my own urine. I can't remember ever having done this before. I didn't hear or see my friend again, and over time grew more disclenched to contact him. Now if I saw him in the streets, I think I would turn and walk the other way in fear of what would happen should our shattered memories get together again. Since watching that video, I have suffered severe sleep disorder and even though been through therapy to quell the constant obsessive repetition of unwanted extreme mental imagery. A few months after watching the video, I returned home to England and haven't returned to Japan since. Although it was 5 years ago and 6,000 miles away, I still can't get away from it. I carry the imagery with me in my head, and I suspect my old friend does too. I don't even know where he is or how he's doing, but last week I received an email headed Alf Autopsy from those anonymous temporary accounts. I deleted the email and powered it down my computer. Wow, I'm not gonna lie, this is the very first time I've ever touched a Alf creepypasta. But yeah, this honestly, I'm gonna say I've got a lot to say about this creepypasta. That one was, well, Alf Autopsy. A Alf Lost Episode Creepypasta written by Zeeboowahmoo. My final thoughts on this story. This is actually quite an awesome creepypasta. I'm not gonna lie. I never expected, to come across this creepypasta. But I have seen a couple people actually, narrate this story. So I decided, maybe I should go ahead and give this one a go. In all due reality, this one was honestly a pretty good creepypasta. I mean, it's a really good lost episode one, and I know this is probably one of the older ones, but I can definitely say this one is definitely really enjoying. It's really enjoyable, and honestly, I gotta say, I mean, this is an older story. I mean, I think this was written back in 2012, 13, maybe 14 or something. I can't remember, but this is actually one of the best creepypastas I've ever seen. It's not well. I mean, it's a laser disc. I mean, this is like an older story, but this was written, back before creepypasta cliches became the new norm of the internet when it came to creepypastas. Honestly, I have to say, that one was actually one of the best stories I have ever narrated. This one definitely is one of the good ones. So, definitely have to say to the author, awesome job with this story. I mean, this is honestly one of the most enjoyable creepypastas I have ever seen. Like, there's a lot of great concepts, such as the grammar. I honestly really love the grammar. The grammar is pretty good, as well as the sentence structuring. The storyline, everything about it was flat out amazing. Oh my goodness, I'm a bit tired. Honestly, this was still a pretty awesome story. I personally have really enjoyed it. There's definitely a lot of great concept, but I really like the grammar of this story. I mean, the storyline, how it built up, was absolutely amazing. It's not, one of those stories that, just throws on, cliche after cliche after cliche after cliche all over the place. No, 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 no. It did not do that, which honestly was awesome. Like, it did not go sit there and, go from one cliche to another. Honestly, it did not do that. This story was definitely a good one. It was flat out amazing and well made in detail. I personally thought it was a really great creepypasta because it involved, a lot of great concept. It's really good in regards to this story. Now, I mean, I have not watched Alf in a really long time, so I have not watched Alf in like years. It's still a really good movie, and I personally really enjoyed it. Now, what did I honestly think of this story? Well, I personally really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, well made in detail. It's pretty good. So, I really gotta say, it's a really enjoyable story. It definitely had been one of the best ones I have ever seen. So I could definitely say there's definitely a lot of stuff that was added in the story. Now I haven't watched this creepypasta, well, I haven't listened to this pasta in a long time. It's a great story. So, what did I honestly have to say? Well, this is honestly one of the best creepypastas I have ever seen. I really personally liked it. So, I guess with that being the case and with that being said, with that being the case, yeah. Like I'm gonna say, I will leave a link in the description down below so you guys can go check this out if you haven't. If you happen to, sit there and if you ever happen to be sitting there and, well, go check out this story, I will say right now, this story is a pretty good one. And if you honestly want to know something, I personally really thought it was enjoyable. I mean, it's a good creepypasta. I mean, there's no guy or whatever, and it's honestly a pretty good story. I personally liked it. So, oh yeah. Honestly, what did I honestly think? It's a good story. So, like I'm always going to say, this is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story is a 10 out of 10. It's a really great Alf creepypasta. I personally liked it. It's really good. So I do have to really say that it's a pretty good story. And I really have to say, it's a good Elf creepypasta. I mean, I have not watched Elf in a really long time, but I'm honestly gonna have to check this show out. I mean, I have not watched Elf in like maybe be years. I can't remember exactly when I last came across the video of Elf. I mean, I'm gonna have to watch Elf. It's been a while. So, anyways, with that being the case, and with that being said, I'm gonna sit here and say, what did you guys personally think of this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm the Lion Queen. I want to thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you're new to my channel, be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will not miss an upload. Also, if I'm missing something, please let me know what it is in the comments below if I'm missing something. Also, I will let you know I am going to leave a link in the description so you guys can go and check out this story if you haven't. So, and as always, if you want to go support me on my channels, such as my backup channel known as Miss Dark Shigo, link to that will also be in the About page section. If you guys want to go support me on DeviantArt as well as Twitter, link to those will also be in the About page section, so you guys can go follow them if you haven't. And as always, if I'm missing something about the story, please let me know what it is. And as always, I'll be seeing you guys all in the next video. Peace out, and like always, please roll the outro because I'm out.